Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to the Roche Idea Lab stage. Please have a seat if you like, as we're about to have our final featured segment of the day here on the stage with Dr. Tran from UC Davis and David Cowlin from Roche Diagnostics. Please welcome them to the stage to talk about our innovative navify solutions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Cowlin. I am Marketing Manager for Roche Core Lab Digital Solutions.
And I'm David Tran, Professor and Senior Director of Clinical Pathology at UC Davis Health up in Sacramento.
So Dr. Tran and I are going to take a little bit of time here today to talk about the role that digital technology plays in the lab of the future, but also improving patient outcomes. Dr. Tran, welcome. This is your second time up on stage. You joined us last year, so you're an old pro at this. I appreciate you coming back and sharing more insights with us.
It's always exciting to come back and share with everyone what we're trying to do, but also more importantly, hear what everyone's doing. There's a lot of exciting developments in this area of informatics, especially in the laboratory space.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Tran, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself as well as UC Davis?
Sure. So my background is a clinical chemist. Been at AACC for quite a long time, but moved up to the clinical pathology director role during the pandemic. So I think like many of you, we became experts in virology, even though we may have had less time in that role, but also growing interest in the area of informatics, predictive analytics. I'm one of the co-inventors, co-developers of a machine learning platform developed at UC Davis, and of course, working with quite an amazing group of people at our institution to further this domain of being able to leverage our data for both our patients, but also creating value for the laboratory profession, right? So very excited in that area. A lot of things are happening, especially this year, as maybe you've seen in the AI world. And I'm very excited to see what's to come.
Can you talk a little bit about UC Davis's use of digital technology and really what's the long-term vision for that?
So I am proud of the fact that we are further along than a few places. We are still embryonic like many others, though, to be completely humbly honest with you. We obviously are moving in the area of digital pathology, getting whole slide imaging recorded, having means to now have pathologists review cases remotely. We have worked hard to standardize our platforms to systems that are both high quality in terms of lab results, but also at the same time integrate within a effectively ecosystem, and we may talk more about it today, but ecosystem of data to be able to more easily access it, because we see a future vision of needing that data to not only improve patient care with predictive analytics, timely results, but also really justifying the resources we need and do every day. UC Davis is also now on what's called a funds flow model of paying for our people. So the more work we do, the more value we create, the more resources we get. And the only way for me to communicate to our leadership of what value we are providing is data, and clean data at that.
We'll get to that clean data in a little bit. Can you talk about the role digital technology can play to enable a more patient-centric delivery of care?
I mean, there's some things that are, like I said, still embryonic, but we live in a data-centric world today, right? So many of you are already standing here with our smart devices on our wrists, in our pockets. Patients are at home with a range of other devices that are showing up left and right and generating real-time data. It could be your bed with a bed sensor. I have a sensor at home that's underneath my bed that is measuring my respiratory rate and heart rate, sending data to my smartphone and creating an archive of health data that I can now monitor over time. I have a smartwatch that predicted me getting food poisoning on a flight flying home to Sacramento. I didn't know I had food poisoning, but it told me I had a elevated heart rate of 120 and you've been sitting around for 30 minutes. Do something about it. I said, must be messed up watch. Took a pulse, it's real. And next day I realized I had food poisoning. So it just shows how powerful this data is, and the more integrated it will be, especially with all the laboratory results, the wealth of knowledge we create from the laboratory profession, it will only create more value for us.
So you mentioned the digital ecosystem a little bit ago. I think many of us have different definitions of what that is. Can you talk about what to you the digital ecosystem is and how that can help optimize patient care?
The digital ecosystem, I think it's not a new phrase. I definitely didn't coin it, but it's been around outside the laboratory profession for many, many years. And all of you are part of such an ecosystem today, right? You have a certain preference for a particular series of smart devices, tablets, laptops, even probably other home devices sitting on what's called, I guess, the Internet of Things, this all interconnected connected network of devices. For those that are deeply integrated, you realize that it becomes a powerful tool. My wife likes to grumble that her PC laptop, she has to go to Dropbox, try to figure out how to transfer a file, and can't get a file because she's not connected to a certain network. All the while I'm on my phone, I'm an Apple user, but the similar things can be done with Android users. Everything I have on my desktop, on my laptop, will be mirrored on my tablet, my iPhone, and I can do it instantaneously as long as there is an internet connection. It works well when it's seamless, and it only works well typically when all these devices are talking the same language, speaking the same system, to be able to seamlessly integrate, right? Because how many of us grumble when you bring in a new device somewhere and it doesn't talk well to another platform, or it doesn't work perfectly with a platform? So digital ecosystem is pretty much a electronic landscape where all these devices ideally are harmoniously talking together and creating more value. So synergistically being able to work together to do more than just individual devices.
So how do you bring some at-home testing into that digital ecosystem?
Well, the first barrier, which I know many committee members, my esteemed colleagues at this meeting, is how do we standardize data transmission, right? There's a lot of work in that space, obviously in the electronic health record realm. There are standards in place, but at the same time, they still operate perhaps on different operating systems, Linux, Windows, and probably even custom-built operating systems. So how to be able to integrate that and even come up with solutions that can allow for bi-directional communications between devices. I'll use point-of-care testing as an example. Probably 20 years ago, it was amazing to just have devices connected. Today, we expect devices to not only be able to transmit results back to our EHR, but I want to be able to transmit trained user lists so I can allow certain people to operate the device that have completed QC training and do so in real time because they're hiring new people every day, right? So I think those are kind of the barriers that we have to overcome. We have to achieve the right standards, which exist, but also build the actual infrastructure, wireless as well as wired communication, to allow that seamless connection.
So talking about barriers, change is hard for everybody, right? Can you talk about some of the barriers or obstacles you came across when you implemented digital solutions at UC Davis? And maybe some tips for those in the audience on how to overcome those objections.
Well, I'm amongst lab colleagues here, so I'll say that probably the first barrier are two letters, our friends in IT. Now, they're barriers because they have a very important role to play, okay? So I've been told at various institutions there's oftentimes over 700, 800 attempts on the network each day. So they have a big role to play to ensure that our data remains secure every day, and of course they have to create measures for that. Likewise, just as us in the laboratory, we're requested to do many different tests each day. IT is requested to do many different things each day, week, hour, whatever. So they are overloaded, overwhelmed. So I think they are a barrier, but they are also our allies in this case. And I think one of the positives that we had at our institution is that we've been successful in building partnerships with the IT team to be able to make them understand that, yes, we need this. This is the reason why, and let's work together for a realistic timeline to implement. Now, that timeline could still be pretty wide, I hate to say it, and I think there is some value and more discussion to be had to figure that out. Other barriers will be pretty much preferences for too much diverse platforms, right? So we have to kind of think about what standardizations we should take, including from a lab testing standpoint, but also an ecosystem. You can't really have an ecosystem just as in Mother Nature, where these instruments and technologies are always in conflict with each other. They have to work well with each other to be able to create value for us.
So one of the things you talked about last year, and I watched you up on stage last year, was this concept of dirta. I love this idea of dirta to data. Can you explain this to the audience for us?
I can't take credit for the word dirta, but we have a esteemed colleague, Dr. Levinson, who's an anatomic pathologist, and dirta is dirty data, right? So I think we've all had a chance to do data exports from our LIS or EMR, and it's not optimal. There might be some results there that may need to be cleaned up. So the key to our world of laboratory medicine, and now with data being part of the things we measure and use to show value, how do we generate data, clean data? So how do we convert from dirta to data? And I'll add in that how we convert then data to actual actionable knowledge, right? Because I could give a doctor an accurate number, but are they going to actually act on it correctly? I can show people any type of data export for our analyzer, but it may not be clean data, right? Could have other data in there that could be very confounding and may be problematic for people who may not understand the data. So we have to move from dirta to data to knowledge.
Now the data won't do this on its own. So what's the best way to sort and organize this data to turn it from dirta to data?
I assume most places probably use one of the most common but very valued resources we have, and that's the human. So in some places, they may have an Excel spreadsheet, and the laboratorian could be working there, going through the list and trying to clean it up. There is opportunities coming up with various types of artificial intelligence to go through the data with defined parameters to perhaps clean it up. And there are now many commercial opportunities to use software to clean it up. But also at the same time, why don't we start with platforms that generate clean data in the first place, and have them work together to be able to create that bigger picture of clean data so that we can move past dirta immediately at the start and get to knowledge.
Excellent. Let's talk about the cloud. Now, cloud-based platforms are growing. Can you talk about the cloud, its role in digital healthcare, and its importance?
Well, cloud data, I think if you asked people 10 years ago first, I think most people go, what's the cloud, right? Is my data floating around literally in the cloud in the sky? Of course, it really means that we're holding data in a virtual space, but the two most important aspects that I feel as a lay user is that it's immediately accessible, very quick. That example I showed earlier about smart devices talking across all my devices, all that data is in the cloud. I just came back from a trip and all my photos are in the cloud. I can pull it from anywhere. But also storage. At some point, your data is going to exponentially increase over time. You have sequencing data, whole slide imaging data, which could be gigabits in size. You will run out of space at your local institution, so perhaps cloud data will be able to help do that. Obviously, you'll have to partner with industry to have that, and we are a center of excellence for a large cloud-based data cloud-based storage provider. But also at the same time, as you have means to share data more easily, you now can have people working on quality issues, developing new predictive analytics, so artificial intelligence-based technologies, just regular routine monitoring of how well you're doing for patient care. And of course, anyone can then access patient data appropriately at any time because it exists in the cloud.
Can you talk about the cost savings associated with the cloud as well?
Yeah, cost savings, I think most people don't realize, the hard drives spinning there or solid state drives that people use these days, whatever it may be, still needs electricity, still needs people, and still needs cooling. I know a lot of large data centers may be based in Canada, I guess, and that's because electricity is going to be cheaper to cool there. And so there's going to be those considerations too, and likewise backing up and security. Many facilities have multiple servers that are copying or ghosting each other, so in the event one goes down, you still have two others available, and these are located in different locations at any given time to prevent a catastrophic loss of data.
So again, change is hard. You probably overcame some obstacles and some challenges to implementing cloud-based platforms at UC Davis. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe some examples there as well?
So I'll say that probably a decade ago now, it feels like a decade, COVID has maybe a little bit fuzzy on timelines, but our cancer center came to us and asked, can we bring in a tumor board software? It was the Navify platform. And not often do we have our clinicians request something, which is great. We love to support that. And one of the challenges we ran early on was, as it was moving through the process for approval, it was revealed that it was cloud-based. And 10 years ago was a lot different perspective of what cloud data was, and everything went to a screeching halt because, oh goodness, cloud data is not secure. 2023 now, we're now using Amazon Web Services servers for cloud data. So it has changed, and of course we've now revisited a lot of cloud-based systems to be able to explore and leverage this. So we did, as honest as I can be, is that we had to overcome our own institutional inertia, something I like to call technological conservatism, where the old ways of thinking may not be relevant, and we have to work with people who are still holding on to that old ways as new technology comes out.
Technological conservatism. I like that. So we've talked about the digital ecosystem. We've talked about cloud-based platforms. We've talked about dirta to data. The question I have for you is, why did you partner with Roche? What about Roche made you want to partner with us?
I think for us with Roche, and I'll just say that prior to probably say even last year, to be honest, that we had a different chemistry line. Molecular, we were Roche. We have different glucose meters at the time. And so the reason why going through a formal process with not just myself and other clinical leaders, but lab leaders, executive leaders, we did a rigorous evaluation on a lot of things. It's not just the test. And we felt that the platform was very good. We were one of the first users of the Gen 5 troponin assay. We were one of the first users of the procalcitonin assay. But the other list of your test panels melded well clinically. But we had to also look at how does it interface with other platforms that will formally be integrated together, i.e. our molecular side. We have certain high throughput PCR platforms there, and likewise now point of care PCR platforms from Roche. We were looking towards the future that we needed a way to harmonize the data with systems that do work well together, and then working with software solutions that tie these things together to be able to, again, do more with the value. I want to be able to, in my chemistry world, to be anywhere in the world, to be able to see where a single tube is of interest, my turnaround times, what step in the workflow. So the lab operations suite would allow us to move in that direction, to have total business intelligence of the work we do every day, rather than to go ask one of my lab staff, hey, can you do a time and motion study for me to figure out how efficient we are? We need the data to do that, and technology can do that.
Excellent. So my last question for you, Dr. Tran, is imagine it's 2028. We're back up on stage. I might have a different shirt on at that time, but it's 2028. What would you be telling us about the digital lab of the future?
Well, hopefully we're both a little bit older but wiser in a lot of things what we're doing. But I think what we'll see, and I can't predict, I don't have the perfect crystal ball for this either, and then the analogy I'll use for this is that just as many of us, when we first saw the first true smartphone, which would have been Steve Jobs presenting on the Apple presentation there, most of us were kind of, why would any of us buy that expensive phone just to text message a little bit more and call people? In 2023, I'm not sure if this generation of people knows a company called Kodak. They invented the digital camera. I'm not sure if you guys heard of a company called Garmin. They used to make GPS devices that we put inside cars. And of course, new jobs such as DoorDash, Uber, shared ride services, right? So I'll say that by 2028, we will see obviously a lot of evolution that we've talked about today, more cloud computing, more integrated systems, predictive analytics coming in, but we will also see a lot of surprising new domains that have opened up that we never expected. But one common theme will be that laboratories will continually have to face the challenge of proving our value. I'm a laboratorian. I know we create a lot of value, but we'll be held accountable to generating the data to our institutional leadership on showing our value, and good data is going to be key to that.
Excellent. I'll hand it over to Jonathan to see if there are any questions out there in the audience.
If you have a question for our speakers, please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. Thank you.
Dr. Tran, you talked a little bit about the mindset change around cloud and the adoption of that within your institution. Do you see other mindset changes needing to occur in the healthcare institutions for this digital adoption to occur?
I think so. I think we have to start including how to access data and data as a almost like an analyte for us, right? Because I think if you talk with folks that may have been in an earlier generation than me, data was just secondary. It was just, I need to worry about talk to the IT guy to figure out how to connect the devices, right? Data is now just as important, if not more important, than, say, how accurate and precise an assay is, right? We forget that there is a third component in the total testing process, which is the post-analytic phase, and that's truly a lot of data-driven stuff there. And so you need to appraise how well this platform you're adopting and how it can connect, generate data for that. It's no longer just how fancy it can aliquot and how fast it can run an assay. Is the data compatibility and data quality at the level that you expect to? And unfortunately, a lot of laboratorians, I've done the CLS MLS program, we don't teach much about informatics and data. We're very lucky, and he's in the audience right there, our clinical informatics fellow. We're one of the first places in the country to have a clinical informatics fellowship. We need to create a generation of laboratorians that are information, not necessarily experts, but savvy to be able to appraise these future devices, to leverage data to as a resource, as a tool.
You triggered a thought there. So I'm curious about how your institution is changing their approach to budgeting to support everything you're describing, right? How's that working?
Well, I mean, we just brought in a AI chief, so we're taking it seriously. We have an amazing chief information office that are just going out to create a vision of hospital at home, so moving tests towards the bedside, not just point of care, but how do we get the diagnostic data from patients, including digital biomarkers and so forth. But I think we are positioning ourselves because we live or die by the data. We're on that funds flow model. Even for me as an administrator in some cases, is I need to make sure I need all my faculty to be able to generate the data. I want clear data to show their productivity, and so that I can support them to get the resources they need. We've gone past the days of being approached by the squeaky wheel individual who says, I need more resources. Well, show me the data. And unfortunately for them, they can't get the data presently, right? That's why we're integrating all these platforms together to be able to get that good data for them.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. Any other questions for Dr. Tran and David? All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, David and Dr. Tran, for presenting. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you.